Hello and welcome back to When Learning Feels Hard. I'm Katie Nelson, Dyslexia and Dyscalculia specialist and founder of the Dyslexia and Dyscalculia Academy. I work with families every week through assessments and support, and I'm also speaking from my own experiences as a parent. In this podcast, we explore the questions many parents find themselves asking when learning starts to feel difficult for their child. Together, we'll look at what might be happening beneath the surface when reading, writing, or maths feels harder than expected, and how parents can begin to support their child with greater clarity and confidence. So, wherever you're listening from today, I'm really very glad that you're here. Today I want to talk about something that many parents notice, but often don't fully understand at first. And that is this feeling that their child comes home from school absolutely exhausted. And by this, I don't just mean physically tired, but emotionally drained, mentally overloaded, sometimes irritable, withdrawn, or completely unable to cope with even small things by the end of the day. You might notice your child comes home and immediately melts down over something really tiny, or they might refuse to talk about school altogether, completely shut down. And maybe homework becomes a battle every evening. Maybe they seem fine at school, but then fall apart the moment they walk through the front door. And I think this can feel really quite confusing for us parents sometimes, because you might hear from school that your child is coping fine, or you might even look at them yourself and think, they held it together okay, all right today, so why are things so difficult at home? But what I would like to explore today is the mental hidden load that many children are carrying throughout the school day. Because for our children with dyslexia, dyscalculia, processing difficulties, attention difficulties, or even underlying anxiety around learning, school can require an enormous amount of invisible effort. And often that effort goes completely unnoticed. I sometimes describe it to parents as a bit like running a marathon that nobody else can actually see. So from the outside, the child may appear to be managing, that they're sitting in class, they're attempting the work, they're getting through the school day. But underneath that, the brain may be working significantly harder than the children around them just to keep up with the demands being placed upon them. So, for example, imagine your child with dyslexia sitting in a classroom where information is moving pretty quickly. The teacher puts instructions on the board, or the children begin reading immediately. The pace of the lesson continues. But for your child, decoding the words may already require extra effort. Holding the instructions in working memory while trying to process what they've read requires more effort. Then organising their thoughts and beginning the task takes more effort again. And this happens lesson after lesson after lesson. By the end of the school day, their brain hasn't just been learning, it's been compensating. The same can happen in maths for children with dyscalculia. So what might appear to be a simple task can actually involve huge amounts of mental processing. Trying to remember number facts, holding steps in sequence, understanding quantity, keeping track of place value, trying not to lose the place on the page as well can come into play. And all that while, they're often very aware that other children seem to be completing things much more quickly and much more easily. And that awareness itself can become exhausting too. Something I see very often in assessments is children who have actually become incredibly skilled at masking how hard things feel. They smile, you see them, they'll copy others. They'll stay quiet when they're confused. They try to avoid drawing attention to themselves. And many of these children become experts at appearing absolutely fine during the school day. But holding that together takes energy, a huge amount of energy. And home often becomes the place where that held together feeling finally releases. They finally let it all out. And that's why some children seem to explode emotionally after school. Not because home is the problem, but because home feels safe enough to finally stop coping. I think that's such an important shift, really, for parents to understand, because once we understand that behaviour differently, we stop seeing the after-school meltdown as bad behaviour or overreacting. And instead, we begin to see it as a nervous system that has simply reached capacity. I remember one parent actually saying to me, it's like she saves her hardest emotions just for me. And underneath that was actually something quite powerful if you think about it, because home was the place her child felt safest to unravel. Now, that doesn't absolutely make it easy, does it? But because when you're trying to cook tea, I totally get it. You're trying to organise the evening. You may have been mum or dad's taxi service, you're helping with homework, and you're managing your own exhaustion too. And those after school hours can feel incredibly difficult, especially when everyone else seems to be saying things like, well, they seem fine at school. And I think many parents quietly question themselves during these moments. We begin to wonder, don't we? Am I being too soft? Should I push them more? Why can't they just get on with the homework? But very often, what looks like avoidance is actually overload. And again, just like we've talked about in previous episodes, difficulty is information. If your child is resisting homework every single evening, that's giving us information. If they seem emotionally exhausted after school, that's information too. It doesn't mean they're lazy, it doesn't mean they don't care, and it certainly doesn't mean you've done anything wrong as a parent. It just means their brain may have spent the entire day working overtime. One thing I often encourage parents to think about is this. Children who find learning harder often don't get the same opportunity to mentally, let's say, coast through parts of the day. So for some children, reading the worksheet is automatic. For others, every sentence requires active effort. For some children, copying from the board barely registers as difficult. For others, it involves visual tracking, working memory, spelling recall, attention and processing speed, all at once. So when you stack hundreds of those moments together across a full day, across a full school day, that cognitive load, it becomes enormous, doesn't it, if you think about it? So let's think about what can help. Firstly, I think one of the most important things is reducing pressure during the after-school window. Sometimes children need decompression before they can engage with anything else. And decompression doesn't always mean talking. For some children, it might mean movement. For others, I know it can mean having that quiet time, maybe a familiar TV programme, or being outside works for others, listening to music, or having a snack and not being asked too many questions straight away as soon as they walk in. Sometimes parents understandably ask lots of questions, and I get this. You know, the moment their child gets in the car or walks through the door, how was your day? You know, you want to know all about the day. They've probably been on your mind throughout the day, and you want to check, you know, what happened in maths? Did you hand your homework in? But for some of our children, even processing those questions at the end of the day can feel like too much. So sometimes the most supportive thing can actually be creating a little breathing space first. Another really important thing is recognising that emotional exhaustion can look very different from child to child. Some children, they become really angry. Some can become tearful. Some completely shut down altogether. Some can seek constant reassurance. Some avoid anything linked to school altogether. And often parents feel worried that they're getting it wrong because their child's reactions seem so very intense. But intensity often tells us how much effort has been going on beneath the surface for a very, very long time. I also think it's important to say this. Children who are struggling, they're often trying much harder than people realise. And sometimes the children who appear quite disengaged are actually the children who are mentally exhausted from trying to keep it all day, all together, all day long. And that's why understanding the why behind the behaviour really, truly matters so much. Because once we understand what's happening beneath the surface, our response, it starts to shift. We move away from that, oh, they're just being difficult, and more towards, they might be carrying more than we realised. And when parents begin to make that shift, our children, they can begin to feel safer, calmer, and more understood. Not because all the difficulties disappear overnight, I'm not saying that at all, but because somebody finally understands the effort behind them. So if your child currently seems exhausted after school, if evenings feel hard, if emotions feel bigger lately, I just want you to know that you're not alone in that experience. Many families are navigating exactly the same thing. And often, beneath those difficult evenings is a child who has simply spent the entire day trying incredibly hard to cope. If this episode resonated with you and you're navigating dyslexia or dyscalculia with your child, please know that you're not alone. You can find more conversations and support inside our parent community, where many families are sharing similar journeys. If you like to keep exploring these topics, make sure you follow the podcast so you don't miss future episodes of When Learning Feels Hard. You can also find more information about the work we do at the Dyslexia and Dyscalculia Academy at www.dyslexia-academy.com. And remember, difficulty is information. When learning feels hard, it's often the first step towards understanding what your child truly needs. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.